Thank you. Okay, so you all know my name's Helen. I'm going to tell you it's Helen Hames. Teresa is my mum's name. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background first, and then I'll go into some of the incredible miracles God's done on my journey through my Christian walk, which has been 20 years on the 22nd of September this year. So it's only just been 20 years. So I'm 55 years young, okay. Married nearly 30 years in March next year, and I've got two beautiful, beautiful daughters. One is married and one lives out of home. So I'm an empty nester and I'm loving it. But I have a bit of a story. I was an adopted child. I was adopted at 2 weeks, and it was actually in those days in 1967, way back before any of you were probably even born, well, some of you anyway. It was actually illegal to adopt a person before they were 31 days old. So it was actually an illegal adoption. I was adopted by my parents who raised me, and they also adopted two other children, two boys. So I have an older brother and a younger brother. We look nothing alike. Like, we seriously look like the weirdest family. My father was 5'4". My mum was 5'5". My youngest brother is 6'1". I'm 5'8", and my oldest brother is 5'7". So it's a very strange looking family. All right. I grew up in a Catholic home. I went to church every Sunday for as long as I can remember. And I love church, and I love God, and I heard about Jesus my entire life. I went to private schools in primary school till year 5, Catholic primary schools, and I really love God, and I always actually felt that God wanted me to be a nun, which, as I grew older, sort of didn't appeal too much as I worked out what that meant. And so I was going to church. I always believed in God, and I believed in what I'd heard about this love thing. I'd heard about this love of God, and something inside me told me it was real. Now, my parents told me it wasn't. They just told me that the stories in the Bible were all stories, and they were just like things to make people happy. And I remember saying vividly at my mum at the age of 7, Mum, I actually believe that this love is real. And until the day I find it, I'm not going to stop looking for it. Because I had something inside of me just saying that is real. But during my time as a child, I got to 8 years old. And unfortunately, I became a victim of sexual abuse. And that went on for 6 years. It was a family member. So it was very difficult to be at home. It was very painful, obviously, and with that sexual abuse came a lot of mental, emotional, and physical abuse. I was beaten quite often if I didn't do what I was told. And so at the age of 13, I went into high school, and I remember very clearly one day sitting in a group of friends on the Oval having a cigarette. And they gave me this thing, and I thought it was a cigarette, and it happened to be a joint. And I got really stoned, and I liked it. I thought, this is cool. I feel good, and I'm not really worrying about going home because I was always frightened to go home. And so it made me feel better. And so from that moment, I was 13, I started using drugs as often as I could, whatever I could get hold of. And my dad at the time was an alcoholic. So we always had a massive supply of alcohol in the house. He had a big bar, and I could drink as much as I want. He would never notice it was gone because it was always full. And so I was just drinking and smoking, and then I started smoking cigarettes as well because, we all did that at school, and that was just the thing. I got a lot of what I went through was mental torment. So a lot of things that were said over me were things like I was a gutter snipe, that I'd be a whore like my real mum, that I was unwanted, unlovable, that no one would ever want me, and that I'd never be a leader. So I lived that life for a long time at home, and of course then I finished school, because in my house you did school. You did not have a choice. You went to school and you graduated. And my parents, I got into nursing. I actually received a music scholarship for the Conservatorium of Music in South Australia because I was a violinist, but my mum and dad wouldn't let me take it because they felt I couldn't earn enough money as a violinist. So I went and did nursing. Now, the first thing that happened was I got an opportunity to go to the nurses' home and live there. So I'm like, yeah, I'm out of here. Pew! Gone. I was gone, like, seriously. It must have been 3 minutes after. No, it wasn't. But, it was pretty quick. But what happened when I did that is my parents then decided that I didn't love them. And so they disconnected from me straight away. I wasn't allowed to call them. I wasn't allowed to go around there. And they wouldn't speak to me. They gave me $300 and said, you've decided to leave home. See you later. You're no longer part of the family. So that increased my reliance on drugs, alcohol, whatever I could have. And I used every drug I could to stop the pain, to stop the horror of what I'd been through. And by 23, I was a serious heroin addict. I was using heroin and methadone and any pill I could eat, shoot up, do whatever I could with it to get high, to stop the pain in my heart, because that's where it all was. It was all in here. But at 23, I was a functioning drug addict, by the way. I was a qualified nurse. I used to sit in the car park, and I'd shoot up, and I'd walk into work and work. And I was able to do that year in, year out. I just kept going, because I don't know, I just kept going. I don't know, that's in me. So at 23, I had got to the point where I wasn't actually able to afford my habits anymore. And so for the first time in my life, I planned a robbery. I was terrified because I was brought up in a Catholic home. You didn't commit crime like that. And I didn't see my drug using as a crime because, you don't at the time. You're just happy. So I planned this robbery, and then at 4 o'clock in the morning, the robbery was planned for 9:05 in the morning. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I just got this, you need to get clean. You need to get yourself together. And I was panicked. I was terrified I was going to do something really wrong doing this robbery. So I got on the phone at 4 o'clock in the morning and I rang every drug and alcohol centre in South Australia to see if I could find a bed. Now, I don't know if anyone knows about drug and rehab centres, but you don't get in like that. That day, I got a bed at 4 a.m. in the morning. I was in there for a month and I never touched another dose of heroin or methadone since. Right. Now, at the time, I actually wasn't walking in Christ. So a bit like Dave said, I actually feel like God's sort of always had his hand on me a little bit, Because during that time, I'd overdosed several times. And people would call me. I'd be rolling on the floor, like vomiting. And they'd call me, and you okay? And they'd come and get me. And they'd look after me until I was sober. So, that's one miracle. Then I met my husband. We were together for 8 weeks when we got engaged. We got married at 6 months. We've been married 30 years in March. It hasn't been a journey of joy. It is a joyous marriage, but it hasn't always been joy. My husband and I, when we came to WA, part of me coming here was to get away from my family and my history from South Australia, and he was from here. So I came to Western Australia, but I moved here pretty naively, and I was very unhappy. And my husband was into drugs, and so guess what? I started using amphetamines. Why not try something different? And so I got hooked on that. Our marriage became quite violent. He didn't hit me, but he smashed the house, and I smashed things, and it was quite unhealthy. And we lived like that for about 10 years. And unfortunately, our daughters saw part of that. And that's probably my biggest regret. And then in 2002, I had a very dear friend whose husband had been diagnosed with motor neurons disease at the age of 39. And that disease kills you. There is no cure. There is no medicine that can fix it. It's unfortunately a death sentence at this stage. God can do miracles, but unfortunately he didn't survive. And that night when he passed away, because I'd been a nurse, my friend had asked me to help him nurse him at home until he died. So I did that. It was about 5 months. And the night he died, my friend and I got so wasted, and we literally got on our knees, and we had both been raised in church, And we just called out, we said, God, if you are real, you need to show yourself now, because if you don't, I was at the point in my life with my marriage, with everything that was going on, I was ready to end my life. And I had a plan, I knew what I was going to do, and I knew it would work. So the next day, after I was very unwell the next day, because I indulged way too much that night in grief, we had to take all the morphine with motor neurons. It's very painful in the last stages, and we had to take all the morphine back to the chemist the next morning. All I wanted to do was put it in my arm, but my friend wouldn't let me. I'm very grateful for that. And we put this CD in our thing. She's like, just put some music on. I don't want to think. I put a CD, and this is the weirdest thing that's probably ever happened to me in my entire life. I put it in, and this song starts playing, and the words to the song were, "If you believe, there are better times ahead." Now, I didn't sort of think much of it. I just listened to it and, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, I don't believe you because, like, my life is rubbish right now. But the thing happened is that it played again. And then it played again. And then we got out of the car and took the morphine into the chemist. And we got back in the car, bawling our eyes out, and it played again. We drove around for 2 hours, and that song repeatedly played in the car for 2 hours. Now, we took that CD out. We thought we were going mad. We took the CD out and put it in the CD player at her house, and it played the first song on the CD. It was song 11 that was playing the whole time. Now, I knew that I knew in that moment that God was with us, that what we were going through, we weren't alone. So after the funeral, the people that did the funeral rang me and said, do you want to come to church? And I went, yeah, no, thanks, lovely. I love you and all, but I'm not doing church. No, thank you very much. I just kept drowning my sorrows. I was very stressed. I was still using the amphetamines and everything. I was so angry. And then, angry. And then this lady, she told me she was praying for me. She prayed with me on the day. And then eventually my friend and I, who had been raised in church, we decided to go to church in September. We fought it for 6 weeks. Her husband died in the April. We fought it for 6 months, in the September. On the 22nd of September 2002, we walked into a little church in Chewett Hill called the Sanctuary. And I walked in there, and from that very moment, which was not long after, the 6 months, I walked in and I knew I was home. And I actually had never felt that in my life. As an adopted child, I had never felt like I belonged anywhere. And the people on the door made me feel so welcome. I actually felt like I'd found my family. And so amongst the sobs, and literally I sobbed the entire service. I have no idea what he said, what they sung. All I could feel was God wanted me, and I heard the salvation call, and I was real scared because I just felt like I was evil and I didn't deserve it. So I didn't go up, but I just went, that's me, I'll do that. And I said the prayer. And for that moment, I'm going to go through some quick miracles because it's just been insane. My husband is still not a Christian. We're 20 years into my walk. He will be a Christian one day, all right, because God says he will be a Christian, all right. But I was convicted to go to Bible college. I went to Bible college. My husband allowed that. Right, number one there, that's a miracle, all right, because he paid for that. All right, so he put me through Bible college. He was still drinking. He threatened to punch our daughter one day. And I drew the line. And I actually got a phone call then from my current pastor saying, I've just been speaking to George O'Neill. I don't know if any of you know George O'Neill. He's the gentleman who runs the naltrexone clinic in Subiaco. Naltrexone is a drug that they give to all sorts of addicts to immediately stop an addiction. And I literally mean it stops it dead in its tracks. It costs a lot of money, but they were asking for someone that purely drank alcohol and wasn't using drugs at the time, and at that time he wasn't. So we actually took him in. I rang him and I said, this is your option. He was at work and he went, you won't leave me, you haven't got the guts. So I packed his bag And he came home, and his front bag was at the front door, and I said, go, I'm done. I don't care if I lose the house, everything, I was done. And he said, I'll go. So we went to the clinic, we saw George, we went back the next day. My husband had a naltrexone implant. He's been sober for 17 years. God is really faithful. His timing, not mine. Right? In my walk, I've been able to forgive my abuser. God told me once in a service that if I didn't go home and forgive my abuser, I would never walk in what he's called me for. And that made me really cranky, because I didn't want to forgive my abuser. I was angry and hurting. But you know what? I did it in faith, because someone said to me, if you do it in faith, it will come to pass in your feelings and your emotions. So I went and I did that. I went home and I spoke to the person. I said, look, this is, it's between you and God now. I'm going to let it go because it's killing me. And I let it go. And the person cried. I'd never seen that person cry in my life. And I can't, other than it was a whole weight of cement lifted off my shoulders the minute I said the word. The minute I said the words. And from there on, that person's last request before they passed away was, can Helen do my funeral? So I did that funeral, and I had not had any good memories of that person for 30 plus years. And the minute I finished speaking at that person's funeral, I had all this massive rush of all these wonderful things that I had done with this person when I was younger, before the abuse started. And it's like God just blessed me with this really special time, knowing that it wasn't all bad, that there had been greatness in there. I lost my job. I've a couple of times lost jobs, not of my own doing, not of my choice. And so it's put us in difficult situations financially. And the initial time, I had been a nurse for 26 years. God had been prodding me to leave, but I like the security and I like paying my mortgage, so I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then eventually he made it happen, which I'm learning to listen, Pastor Phil, I am, trust. And he made it happen, and then people kept saying, be a chaplain, be a chaplain, be a chaplain. And I'm like, are you mental? I'm not doing it. And then Lord's going you need to be a chaplain. I'm 2 weeks, I'm fighting in prayer with God. No, I don't do children. 26 years, right? I've 26 years, I've been a nurse. I've never done children's nursing. I am not working with kids. You are insane, Lord. I'm sorry, I love you, but I can't do that. Well, after 2 weeks of debating this with God, I think you all know God wins. So I just went, okay, whatever, but you watch. See, I'll go in there, they're going to go, no place for you, you don't fit, you've got nothing to offer, see you later. I walked in there, I had my interview, and they put me in the pool straight away. I was like, oh, okay. So I don't know what to do, but okay. And then I went for 2 interviews, didn't get them, said, see, God, huh. And then the 3rd interview I got it before I even finished driving down the road. I've now been a chaplain 11 and a half years with kids, right? Who knew? But then also, I lost my job at the end of last year. Not my doing. It wasn't my choice. And I've got to tell you, it was probably one of the hardest things that I've experienced in my recent times. And my parents have always had money, but they've never given me anything, because they've always said to me, you pick your path, you walk it. You lie in your own bed. You made your bed, you lie in it. That was my mum's favourite saying. So they've never shared their finance with us. We've always done it ourselves. And I've always been happy for that. That's life, isn't it? That's all cool. And so I wasn't thinking anything other than, if I don't get a job, I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my house. And I'm freaking out. My daughter's just about to get married. I've got money going out there. I've got a mortgage to pay. I've got no job. And I was really starting to stress. And I got quite worried about it. And then I came in and I was praying about it. And then at the last minute of last year, I got a phone call. And Girraween Senior High School was prepared to wait till term 2 for me to start being a chaplain in their school. After being loyal to the company for 11 years, I was given another opportunity to walk with kids and bless them and help them in their time of need, you know. When I came into this church, I'd been prompting. Ginny knows a little bit about this. Ginny and I have known each other for a long time. I came to this church because God had been telling me to come to the church, but like I wasn't coming to the church because like I was happy where I was and I don't listen to God. I do better. I'm doing better. And I didn't want to leave because I was comfortable. I like comfort and I like security. I'm not good at change. And he forced his hand and I came here. But for the 6 months before, I'd been driving past this church and I kept getting like, you're going to lead the kids' ministry one day. I'm like, yeah, right. I'm good. It's all good. Thanks. And when I came, eventually I got forced and I came because I didn't want to be out of church. My heart was to be in church. I've always wanted to be with the Lord. Don't care what people think anymore. I just want to be So I came. And I walked in, and a day I walked in, I found out they'd just appointed another children's leader. I had to take a very big breath, and I went home and I had quite the argument with the Lord about that. I'm like, why did you do that? Why did you pull me out? And why are you doing this to me now? And I just got, you need to sit. Oh, no, okay. I grumbled for about a year to the Lord. I was sitting, but I wasn't doing it humbly. I was quite angry. And then I then settled and I just started, getting involved a little bit and stuff. And then in 2018, I was approached and asked to be the kids leader in this church. Now, God's, in all of this here, it's God's timing. It's not mine. I want things. I have heart desires, but it always comes to pass in His time, not mine. So it's been quite amazing. So I've just written this for trusting in Jesus for me and having faith, declaring with my mouth that I believe, and I tell everyone, I don't care who they are, where they are, I tell everyone I believe in the Lord. It gives me the authority and the power over the darkness that I feel and surrounds me sometimes, but it gives me the boldness and courage like Joshua because I believe. In Joshua 1:6-9 it says, to face each day as a new one, knowing that His mercy is new every morning and He gets up with me and He never leaves nor forsakes me. Because see, you know what? I'm still a work in progress. I'm still overcoming stuff, but the Lord's right with me. So every time I feel alone or I'm unable to face what's going on, I get frustrated with my husband because he's not a Christian. I just remind myself I'm not alone because I've always felt alone. Until I came to Christ, I never felt like I had a family. And you don't know how much that means to me to know that I have a family. It doesn't matter if you're not blood, you're my family. And I love every one of you, And it's because I hang out with you, And a bit like Dave, every time I think I know better, it turns out bad. So I'm learning quite slowly, I admit that if I listen to God, things turn out well, And it's not always in my timing, it's always in His. So it says in Romans 8:28, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him and have been called according to His purpose. See, I love God. And so trusting that He has my best interest at heart adds to my faith, and this helps me to become bold and courageous and step out when He asks me, just like Joshua did when he stepped into the promised land. 20 years ago, I used to go to an outing and I used to sit under the table and shake. I was so frightened of conflict and confrontation. Today, I'm passionate. I'm not fearful, I am fearless. And I go out there and I tell people that my life is like it is today because of Jesus, right? And when my mum came over, the last miracle, when she came over to Perth and my daughter was getting married, and I was totally mental about my finances because I do not deal with insecurity. My mum came over and her words were, "You've looked after people all your life, Helen. So I am paying your mortgage off right now." That is a miracle of God.